Happy New Year. Oh, well, not quite yet. Hey guys, my name is Hank Balch. You're watching Beyond Clean, and we're doing a live stream today. Sterile Processing 2025. What to look out for. We've got some fantastic guests who will be joining us in the studio in just a moment. And obviously, if you're familiar with that song at all, we're talking about the new year. And we're going to start talking about the present year, 2024. What's kind of brought us to where we are at the end of 2024. And then we're going to talk a lot about what's coming down the pipeline in 2025, what our opinions are, what to look forward to, what's changing, the priorities. Everybody always wants to know what's Joint Commission looking at these days, or DNV. So I got a feeling that's going to come up. And then we're also going to be talking about the trends and the challenges that are facing each and every one of us in departments today, from staffing to technology, you name it. We've got an hour, and we're going to try to cover as much of it as we can. This is a live stream, so it is December 11th right now. If you're tuning in live, we'd love to hear from our live viewers, the clean freaks out there that have carved out time, precious time in your day to tune in. This is going to be a CE approved episode. So we're going to have a secret code toward the end of this session that we'll give you. And then we'll put the link to the CE quiz in the comment section in the description of all these streams here. But stay tuned for the code to make sure to get your 1 CE. And finally, if you're tuning in live, we want to hear from you in the comments. Let us know who you are, where you're tuning in from. And if you've got any comments or questions for the guests today, or if you've got your own ideas about what 2025 in sterile processing is going to look like, I want to know. We want to know. And again, if there's any questions, we'll try to tackle them in the time that we have today. Okay. Without further ado, let me welcome into studio on stage our two guests here today, Ron Hunsucker and Rebecca Peplau. Welcome, y'all.
Hey, glad to be here.
And I say y'all, the cowboy hat, Ron's cowboy hat just brings the Southern out of me.
He had to tip it too. So,
both from the Healthmark team, Healthmark getting a company now. I think most folks are starting to get that into their vocabulary. They understand the relationship, but that is, fairly new too. Maybe we can talk about that if it comes up as well. But yeah, welcome to the show. For anybody who may not know you two, let's start with a round of introductions. Ladies first. Rebecca, what's your background? And what are you doing now?
So my background is such that I started in the veterinary profession doing sterile processing before I knew what sterile processing was. And from there, I met Sarah Cruz, where she's like, hey, we can do this in humans, right? And I was like, okay, sure, let's rock and roll. So from there...
Sarah, how did you know Sarah? Like, did y'all work together?
Yeah, we worked at the vet clinic together.
Okay.
So
I did not know that.
We met. Yeah. So basically she was the one that, found out that this is a field that happens in humans, and let's just see what we can do. So from there, I started work. We took a class together and then worked in various hospitals in various roles up until recently, where I joined Healthmark in early October. So yeah, and then I, throughout the course of it, got involved with Amy standard creation, that worked with a lot of people there, and formally did the Behind the Red podcast with Alessandra. And so that was awesome as well. So.
And you were a member of the Beyond Clean Advisory Group too.
Yes.
I want to leave that out. Little connection here with BC. So
yeah, that's true.
A lot of fun.
I know.
It's easy to lose track of
no.
when you start doing like so much, because you're right. Like, the podcasting, were you a part of the Clubhouse? I know, like, for a little season there, they were doing the Clubhouse thing on the app too.
Yep. The Clubhouse, Sterile Processing, What You Don't Know, which was really awesome. So we had some good times on that. So.
Yeah. So maybe we'll talk more about the kinds of networking opportunities that are coming up in 2025 too, because I know a lot of those things change quickly as well. But yeah, welcome to the show, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Cowboy, Ron Hunsucker, the cowboy. Do you what is your name? Do you have kind of like a slogan, sterile processing name that you go by?
Well, they call me the Cowboy of Clean,
Yeah.
Cowboy
and my slogan is "Do it right the first time, every time." So
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we need to put that little tagline underneath your name here next time. Cowboy of Clean. Ron, welcome to the show. So, what's your background?
Well, I started back in '79. Got certified, and I believe it was '84. Been a manager probably over 20 years. Last 10 years, which was in the OR. So I spent 30 years total in a hospital. And then I went like 14 years, I was a sales rep, and I actually picked up Healthmark. So I used to say being a sales rep was going to the dark side.
Yeah. No, that's a phrase to kick out there. Yeah.
Yeah. But in the interim, I learned it was kind of like going to the light because I got a chance to go across the country and meet new people and help them with their sterile processing and get them up to par and give them fair warning what's coming down the pipe, which is basically what our show's about today, I imagine.
Yep.
So, yeah. So, other than
Yeah,
that,
it's really
and
cool and encouraging when clinicians get that opportunity. Like, obviously, there's a lot of great sales folks and vendors that don't come directly from the clinical background. But to see clinicians be able to make that jump and to do so successfully, I I feel like it means something special if you're engaging then back into the departments that you used to work in, that you used to be a part of, uh, because in your bones, you know the challenges, and you never forget that, no matter how long you've been on the dark side, if you will, Ron, because it just becomes a part of your DNA.
yeah, it does. I mean, and I always tell people if you haven't done the grunt work, you can't tell people how to do the grunt work.
I agree with you on that 100% because if you're not used to like physically doing those roles, your perspective may be a little, I want to say flawed, in a way because
It's just always going to be an outsider view is what it is, right?
yeah,
Like, you can only know so much by reading a book or by looking and talking. And the other side, experientially, it's walking in their shoes. That's the cliche, and that's why it works, because like, you can only understand so much without being in the PPE and being
hmm
under the pressure of the turnovers, and all of those things are just day-to-day SPD. Uh, so speaking of that, Rebecca, I know we talked briefly before we went online here, but you're fairly new to the Healthmark team. So what was that transition like for you? Because I know we're going to have a lot of people tuning in, and their 2025 goals may be, I'd like to make the jump. I'd like to go
oh,
work for somebody out there, do what Ron's talking about, travel the country and see places and be able to make an impact even outside of my department. So, was it what you expected? And talk us through just the insider view of that.
so this has been my dream job for many, many years. And when you finally land your dream job, when you're not expecting to land your dream job, life just turned upside down. So for me, I didn't anticipate like the culture shock, I guess, of having to go in, punch a clock, even with the manager roles and being salary. It's still, you have to go to the facility, you're working on site, you're working, there was a significant culture shock, and there still is. So having to relearn how you work and how you manage your time working from home, I didn't expect it to be um, this difficult, but I'm like it's day by day learning how to, I've worked my whole life. I've been, a regular worker. Like you punch the clock, you go in. So now all of a sudden you have to rethink the way of doing that. But it's been amazing the resources that I've had and how the culture of the company and my colleagues have been with this, and helping to shift my perspective of, hey, you're working on projects, you're doing this, and it's still like getting I might just, I'm learning a lot about myself too. I might be one of those people that needs to go to the library and work on things instead of being at home. And that's
Mhm.
totally okay. Not everyone's going to be able to sit at home and work their best.
Yeah.
So I think is that just a culture shock kind of thing? Maybe, but we'll see what the next couple months have bring. It's only been 2 months so far. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely right. And on this panel, I think Ron, obviously, you've had the longest experience in that model of, I mean, not even work from home. It's really kind of work on the road,
yeah,
work outside of the office. Yeah, like all over the place. Um, and
I
especially
like
since
it.
COVID, everybody's wanted. If you get the opportunity to work from home, that's like the dream scenario. Is, hey, can I just work remote? Well, um, there's a lot of jobs like sterile processing in particular that you can't phone it in. You got to be there to do the process and the cleaning and the sterilization and the storage and the dispatch. Then all of the support roles, like on the vendor side, obviously there's a lot of remote opportunity these days, but it is a completely different culture and dynamic and expectation. So Ron, in your experience, and definitely like since COVID, what has that uh, what impact has technology, even like these kind of video calls and platforms, how has that impacted your ability to work in a very flexible context that we live in today?
Well, I was much like Rebecca. As a matter of fact, after 2 weeks of working for Healthmark, I called my director, Marianne Drosnock, and said, I don't feel like I'm contributing to the team. What can I do? And Marianne told me, be careful what you ask for.
uh,
so, so I have learned to be careful what I wish for. But I've really enjoyed it, and I love what sometimes it gets me quite perturbed to where I go across the country and I see all this new technology and these new ways of inspecting and cleaning verification and all this, and I'm like, where was that when I was in sterile processing?
I know.
Where was it? It wasn't there. Drying cabinets? Oh my lord! you know,
Yeah.
right.
uh, horoscopes? Who would have even thought? I everything has changed since the '70s and '80s, and if people do not keep up with AMI, HSPA, AORN, APIC, and so on and so forth, uh, they're going to fall behind. I listened to a podcast yesterday from an APIC. Uh, it was an APIC podcast, but a
Mhm.
couple of infection professionals were on there, and one of them actually said, "I never knew sterile processing even existed."
Mm.
Yeah.
And when she went down there and found out all we have to do now, from the biologicals to the cleaning verification to the borescope and documenting everything we do,
Right.
she's like, my head almost blew up. I
Yeah.
never realized how much it entailed. So, yeah, I love some of the new stuff coming out. I'm a real advocate for some of the UV stuff coming out right now. Um, um, what is it?
Yeah,
Lab
I
on
think that
microchip.
perspective there, Ron, of being able to see outside the four walls of your department is a huge but your shift in. And like, you don't even need to be a vendor, right? But like if you start traveling around, even as like a consultant in SPD, or in your chapter area or your region, and just touring some of these other facilities, or as a traveler, quite frankly, they see it too. Just how many different ways there are to do things, how many different places in this trajectory of growth. Like you mentioned, Ron, like there's some departments that are operating still like they're in the 1980s.
Yeah.
You got some in the 90s, some are in the early 2000s. You got some that are like way down the road, like Jetson type stuff. It's like, how do you have this tool and this tech and this data? And it's a really interesting dynamic then, because we're trying to move the industry all in one direction, but we're all starting at different places sometimes. Um, to that point, Rebecca, let me kind of throw this question to you here. Part of what we want to talk about today is the current state of the industry here in 2024 as we're closing out the year. What's your pulse on what departments, what seminars, what the regulatory conversations, what have they been focusing on here in 2024?
Um, some of the more common things let me rephrase that. Let me just bluntly color code tape.
Okay.
If you have color code tape with your offsites,
Still,
it's I'm not
still,
saying it's if you have a small facility and it's something you can control every single time, God, bless you. Let's just
yeah.
say that. But it's just not something that in today's sterile processing world with where we can sit there and inspect. It's just one more added thing that it's the risk is too high to have it there. There's so many more methods for instrument identification now. Let's move away. Let's figure it out. We've had a couple of calls from customers about count sheets in sets, whether
Yeah.
they're in like the little paper bags or if they're in towels. They're really looking at that. Engraving is always a hot topic with them. So, single-use instruments or reposable instruments being mixed in with OR grades. They're very adamant about that right now. And then another one was peel pouch validation for double pouching. You need to make sure that you have that, that your IFUs for your pouches are on par. And basically, like having IFUs for everything, they're going to ask you guys to pull IFUs. So if it's something where you need to be able to have that access, pull it up as they need it, and get it right to them.
Yeah, you brought up the packaging stuff. And that's a conversation that has come up and will continue to come up in Melinda Elamari's packaging princess expert series that we're doing on Beyond Clean. So definitely, if you hadn't caught those yet, that's a video series that we're doing with Melinda. But yeah,
Awesome.
great insight there. And you're right, that theme keeps coming up. But Ron, I want to ask you the list that Rebecca gave. There's nothing necessarily new in that list that if I were to ask you this question in 2023 or 22 or 21, what are the top priorities today? I mean, color coding of your tape, not engraving, single use.
But you
Are
know
we
what?
just
Let me just say that's like in my immediate area. I haven't really
no?
expanded
But
to see, but
I agree with you.
I wonder if
Yeah,
it's different down your ways, down in
that's a
your
good
neck of the
question.
woods.
Down my way.
Down south there.
It's rubbing off. I'm telling you, Ron, it's the hat. It's the power of the hat.
I can speak with a better accent you want.
But yeah, Ron, like, what do you think about it? Like, are we continually in sterile processing? Are we rehashing the same top 10 challenges year after year with a couple of new ones kind of mixed in? Or is it a geographical kind of wave of, depending on where you are in the country, you may be dealing with different things at different times?
Well, sometimes it's not geographical. It's like, who do you work for?
Yeah.
Because I went to a VA facility and I went, wow. Went to another facility, brand new facility here in San Antonio, and all the walls and everything and ceiling, it was all cleanable,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah.
It was basically a metal, a real thin sheet of metal surrounding the whole department, and each area was huge. Which Hank, we never had
I know.
huge in
Space.
sterile
Yes.
processing.
It's happening.
Yeah, because we're the least thought of department when they build a hospital. Unfortunately, times are changing. What I have noticed is that when you start getting like infection prevention involved, which they are becoming more and more so. I'm a member of APIC in my area, and I really enjoy sitting in our meetings and comparing notes with them and finding out stuff that I usually don't know. AORN, you have to keep up with all of it. But I'm finding out that competencies are becoming a real biggie.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Not just orientation, because orientation is different from competency. So every department has an orientation checklist, but do they have a competency checklist? And who's
Right.
signing off on the checklist? Because of new amendments last year or 2 years ago, what is it, amendment number 2? Or was it amendment number 1? Number 1? On
Number 2.
CBS, on cleaning in the
Oh,
department, interdepartmental cleaning. Yeah, it's 1. Yeah. and some of the amendment number 2, which is on insulation testing. So I mean, it's becoming more focused, and I hate to say this, but it's because of the pandemic. It made people realize that who do we go to if we don't know what to do?
Right.
Who do we go to? They had to
I
go to
don't
sterile processing.
I do get upset sometimes because it seems like some of the regulatory bodies, it's like they're focusing on these things that are not, and they're nickel and diming things like, um, this is my personal opinion, by the way, nickel and diming things that are less worrisome, like the count sheets in the set. Yes, there has been like a study or two about that, but realistically, like the facility that you're at is also not insulation testing.
Right.
Why aren't
Is that the
you
biggest threat? Yeah.
right? They're not
Yeah.
identifying these massive threats. And it's just
Right.
like, it's not, to me, it's, I've always had a gripe with it as a leader and that kind of thing as well. But it's like, why aren't they picking up on some of these super egregious things that the same departments are doing? I
Yeah.
don't understand.
Yeah, well, maybe if we have time on this session, maybe we'll come back to that because that is a really important conversation in the industry. Like we've touched on in various conversations through our network, and I know it's been touched on elsewhere too. But um, I don't want to get us quite off track on that because I can spend the rest of the
I
time
know.
talking about that. You're tempting me, Rebecca. But um, transitioning in the segue that Ron brought up with, hey, like we've learned a lot of lessons, there's a lot of impacts coming out of the pandemic, Rebecca. One of those impacts is the staffing
Mhm.
impact. We lost a lot of people in the pandemic just through burnout, like alone, especially in these areas such as sterile processing that were part of that critical staffing unit that we had to come to work and we didn't all have the protection that we wanted many times, or we were doing things that we weren't exactly sure, is this the right way or the best way, but it's just the way that we had to do it because of all of the pressures and whatnot. So here we are today. What's your pulse in your area, your neck of the woods, and just a conversation with other industry leaders? Are we back to stabilized in staffing and sterile processing? And if not, or if so, how are we seeing people mitigate the challenges that are still present?
You know, it's interesting because my immediate area in central Maine seems to be leveling out.
Okay.
However, when you go to southern Maine, it's completely different. Because I mean, everywhere in the country, you know, the cost of living is insane right now. And Portland, Maine is one of those areas that the cost of living has just skyrocketed compared to like minimum wage. So a lot of the folks that used to work in that area or live in that area have had to move outside of the city. And the thing is, like, lower cost housing isn't really a thing right now, but it's slightly cheaper the farther you go away. So now more people are commuting 40 minutes to over an hour. So
Right.
they have the added cost of gas, but lower cost of rent. So there's some struggle there, especially with the pay. N- I can't speak to all the facilities, but I know it hasn't, it is what it is. But in my immediate area, it does seem that people are, they're staying longer. The retention rates in my neck of the woods, um, have seemed to stabilize. People want to stay and they want to grow in the field. But I also feel that if the facility isn't going to provide people with room to grow, they're just going to go somewhere where they can expand they want to do better. They want to learn more. They want to be able to help patients more. And if they're not going to be able to do that where they stand, everyone's going to move. So
What do you see anything, Rebecca, in particular in the departments that are keeping people? What are they doing that's working? Because obviously, like you said, hey, if you're not giving the opportunity for growth, the people are going to leave. Uh, what does the good model look like?
I think that you have leaders that are engaged with their team. They're actively working together with their team. I think there are some facilities that have rolled out career ladders, and advocated for some more pay increase. But being able to continuously allow education in the department, whether that's in services or webinars or continuously engaging the teams.
Okay. What about you, Ron? Are you seeing the same staffing challenges or constraints, or maybe not in, in your neck of the woods in Texas and elsewhere?
Here down in the Rio Grande Valley, it's been a real challenge.
Mm.
Austin, not so much, but the further south you go, not many people know what sterile processing is about. We're trying to get out there more and more, but I am glad to see that through even HSPA, CSPDT, our population's growing, and
Yes, it
everybody's
is.
starting to recognize sterile processing as a healthcare professional. And personally, I believe anybody that works in a hospital, from EVS to maintenance, they're all healthcare professionals, because we have to follow certain things in the hospital.
Yes.
You guys know this. We had to, CPR training, HIPAA training, all the shots, la 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 la.
Yes.
Continuing education. But I've also noticed that a lot of people are hiring educators to stay in their department.
Okay.
And that's making a real big difference. If you have an
It
educator that is passionate about sterile processing, that passion will rub off on other people. And like Rebecca said, having a director or a manager that is directly involved with the staff, and recognizing the staff, not himself, but recognizing the staff for getting stuff done, is really important. And involving in staff and all the decisions, you got to make them own it. Once they
Yep.
own it, if they help make that transition, then they own it. So
I think that, you know what, Ron, I also agree with that. Like, I was thinking about the amount of educators that we're seeing in the field right now versus where it was 2 to 3 years ago. It's way, way more. And I think that having an educator in your department changes everything. But you have to make sure that person is the right fit for that role. It's not necessarily a position where you're going to be in the office all day. You still have to help from time to time with things on the floor, but you have to be engaged in the continuing education world. You have to listen to the webinars on the internet. You have to read articles. You have to be somebody totally immersed in sterile processing to bring that back to your team and get everyone to the highest level that they can be and share that knowledge base you have.
Right. I think that is a critical insight for department leaders to know, and for like for frontline technicians, but then also just for the educator role themselves at role. That you don't hire someone who knows everything and then just expect them to like deploy that knowledge. You hire someone who has the ability to teach and
Mhm.
the desire to continue learning, but you've got to give them time to consume that education, because if they don't have time to consume the new guidelines or the new webinars or the new podcast, or whatever articles are out there and everything else, if they don't have time to consume it, like what are you expecting them to do? Like go home like off the clock and then study for their job?
Mhm.
Like nobody else does that in sterile processing. Like you doing
No.
work off the clock? No. But do we expect our educators to do all the consumption of education off the clock? And then when they're here in the department for 8 hours, that's when they're deploying it in their building. So I think it's really important that model and that time that we're giving to our educators has got to be built in a percentage of their day or their week of just consuming information.
I agree with
Yeah,
that. And I think that while the awakening of the education role is upon us, I do feel like the next step is realizing that the educator can't do it by themselves. You need to be able to have preceptors underneath the educator or designated people to help that training. Um, the educator cannot do it all.
yeah,
Maybe if you have a small facility, but if you have a large facility of like 70 people and you hire like 5 people at a time, you cannot expect the educator to, it's too much. You need preceptors. So if you don't have designated techs, or an added responsibility in their tech ladder could be precepting if they're the right fit. You can't learn from somebody who's condescending and has an attitude, or somebody that continuously takes shortcuts. You have to have somebody that is
I
sympathetic,
mean, you can
empathetic,
learn from them, but you ain't
patient.
learning the right things
Yeah, but I'm
by
not gonna,
somebody.
if I'm questioning a process or want to know more about the way I'm doing something and I have a question, I'm not gonna ask somebody who's being
Yeah,
rude to me. I'm not
right.
gonna feel comfortable to approach that person. So
Yeah.
I think that's the
No,
next
that's
step
absolutely
of
right.
where we need to go. Yeah.
Um, yeah, as you were talking, Rebecca, I was remembering that look that I've seen in the manager's eyes, and both of y'all have probably had this look, and you've probably seen it in other managers' eyes, but that look of overwhelmed,
Mm,
burned out, no support, and it just like it becomes a part of their persona many times. But that same look, if you meet the average educator who's got 50, 60, 70 people that they're responsible for, all the annual competencies, all the onboarding and training, all the quality and management, all the in-service coordination, unbelievable amount of weight. So, to your point, Ron, it's great that we're getting more of these in. But then to your point, Rebecca, we got to get them in and we got to equip them with everything else that they need to be successful. If it's
yeah.
preceptors, if it's time, if it's training. I mean, huh,
Stop having your educators order supplies for the department. Stop having them
yeah,
like manage inventory. They
yeah.
need that's out of their focus. Like you can't put that on the educators anymore. I know so many educators that have like education, but then like all of these other roles within the department. And I'm like,
Managers are the same way,
yeah,
right? The manager who's
can't
also the
do it all.
educator
Yep,
and the
that's
orderer
true.
and everything else.
It's literally too
Man,
much for one person. You're
yeah.
gonna skip things. So not
Okay,
intentional.
Ron. Um, ST108.
Oh,
Big
lovely.
big deal here 2024. And I get did it come out in 2023? Has it been that long now? I don't know, maybe early
Mm,
2024. Either way,
It's right before the conference.
it's
So
rolling out
yeah,
and there's some implementation going on. What's your pulse? Do people like do they feel confident out there? What kind of questions are you getting?
oh
Have we
man,
arrived? Are we done? Are we ready to move on from ST108? Is that just kind of everyone assumes it now?
I've actually been asked to come in and evaluate the process. I've gone into places where their ROI was empty. Uh, you know,
Oh, they're
their tank, their
yeah, their
reverse
I've
tank.
seen
osmosis
that
Yes.
tank
too.
Yep.
was empty, and they were getting the little blue beads in their trays
Mhm.
because that's usually what's in the
Surprise.
bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I also found out that a lot of people don't. Some I went to one facility and they actually had DI water going to their sterilizer,
Mhm.
but the DI water was going through iron and copper pipes.
Ugh.
Right.
Well,
Right.
DI water has no minerals, and water is a great dissolver.
Mhm.
So it was picking up the minerals from the iron and the copper on the way to this to the sterilizer.
Yep.
So I'm starting to see. I think Geninga, even Steris, have these now self steam generating sterilizers
Mhm.
that can actually use DI or ROI water and with stainless steel piping around it instead of copper. I love to see that. Um, but anyway, it's
Is
that
it
people
so? Are
don't.
you
It's
are you
harder to.
getting questions then, Ron? Like, is it ST108 implementation questions, or are you just getting more? Hey, we got problems with the water, and maybe it's just because they're paying more attention to it, but they're like something's going on. If it's black specks, if it's water quality or whatever. But then now
Yeah.
we had a tool to say, well, let's take a look at this whole thing. If we're going to talk
Yeah.
about the impact, there's a lot more that comes to this.
Well, there is, and I know a couple of the plant ops I've been into. They're like, it's going to be impossible to meet this standard.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, do
Did
you?
they get that same look in the eyes we were talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Uh,
yeah. How are we going to do that?
yeah.
And we can make suggestions like filters and actually insulating the pipes that are going to the sterilizer, stuff like that.
Right.
But they don't know about non-condensable gases. They don't know about steam quality. They don't know about saturated steam. They don't know about steam dryness. They don't know any of that. And if you work with fan ops along with I'm sorry, I think every hospital should be a multidisciplinary team. Every department should come together. There should be a representative from every ding dang department in every meeting, especially when it comes to problems with sterilizers or, wherever in the facility. But that's one of the main things. Everybody thinks it's impossible to meet that standard, but I've seen it done. I've seen it done. It just takes time. It takes patience. You keep on trying until you get it right, which is what we've been doing in sterile processing for how many decades? Five.
Right.
Anyway, a lot.
Quite a few. Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Rebecca? What's been the conversation like? You were in the department the majority of 2024. So, what was your experience having this new standard kind of staring you in the face?
So the last facility I was at actually had a water quality council already established.
Great.
So
And they
basic,
do because of Legionella
yeah,
and like that kind of stuff, right? Like
yeah.
should have an existing one. Yep.
Yep, and I was shocked because I didn't think that was a thing, right? So as another like a newer manager, I'm still learning this stuff. And so I was like, "Hey guys, these are the bullet points from ST108," because they knew TIR 34, but I was
Right.
actually, I was able to bring that to their attention. And there was somebody they had coupled with people that were from ASHRAE, people that work with outside laboratories to help us review water testing and what departments are going to need to help this. Because for us, it was an issue where there's a lot of added costs with the water testing. And if you don't get the right lab, some of those endotoxin tests can be super expensive, but you really have to know where to look. And so to actually budget like an additional huge excess of money for that was very hard for them to kind of like, it wasn't planned for, but most facilities around here, I feel like have something with their water treatment because of how hard the water is around here. But I feel like as a general, let me just say like a general assumption would be that in my immediate area, folks are almost there, but I think the additional testing would be the second part of that and the routine screening.
I think that takeaway, though, to your point about the water committee, just highlights what Ron said. Okay, we got to be collaborative, but even that standing water committee that's already there in your hospital, if you've never been invited to that as a sterile processing leader, I know I never was when I was a manager director. Nobody ever said, "Hey, y'all, you use a lot of water. Water's kind of critical to what you do. You should probably be on this committee with us." Well, now ST108 gives us a great excuse to bring additional value to that committee at the same time that we're leveraging that committee to help us get what we need and where we want to go, which is compliance with that 108 across our facility. And it's a lot of work. I know we've got a water quality expert named Jeffrey Paquette that's on our 2024 Beyond Clean Water Expert Series. And we've got great conversations with him, but we're actually just going through the ST108 kind of section by section in those interviews and talking about what are the challenges, how do you implement, what are the questions and assumptions there. So I've learned a lot, even in the past 12 months myself, just talking to Jeff on that. Let's transition here a little bit to your perspective on what is coming around the corner. I know this is really hard to say. Because of all the complexities we've been talking about geographically and just, where departments are with technology, but then also there's a lot of innovators out there that are working really hard to solve our problems. There's a lot of companies that are got a lot of big plans, a lot of new launches coming in 2025. So, personally, what are you most excited about? You either hope's going to happen in 2025 or you think it's going to happen in 2025, or you're going to work your butt off to try to make it happen in 2025. You can take whatever direction you want to go. Maybe we'll start with you, Rebecca.
So I have started to see more companies when you're like looking up an IFU on their website, you'll get prompted, "Hey, would you like to receive email notifications if this IFU updates? Put your email in." So that's awesome. So I'm excited to see that trend, and I hope it keeps going. I really like that there are more borescopes available for departments to purchase in pieces. So managers have access to buying that kind of equipment through like minor equipment budgets or multiple POs. That's
Oh, that's
not
what.
something.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
so
was just understanding that.
it used to be something where people couldn't. It was way more difficult to buy one, and I really, really hope that keeps going. Um, and then I think I want to see. I like that more. There have been some IFUs that specify that you must use a borescope in certain parts of your inspection. I want that so bad. I want more manufacturers to say you must inspect this with a borescope, because it doesn't make sense not to at this point in technology. So I really want that of 2025. More folks to put their foot down with that.
Do you on that borescope topic? Obviously, that's one of those. Borescope technology is not new in
No.
general anywhere, and it's been an SPD. I mean, I gotta say, for probably a decade now, of just like the first inroads of these borescopes. Do you see the cultural dynamics changing, or those timing dynamics, Rebecca, that departments and leaders are getting? I don't know if more comfortable is the phrase, but just more aware of how this inspection step is going to impact your workflow and your productivity levels.
Yeah, because I mean, if education wise, there's been a ton of information out there about the use of borescopes with arthroscopy shavers, flexible endoscopes. More and more education is based around findings from those borescopes. So that awareness has become more enhanced, I believe.
Right.
People are talking about it more. And then when you have that IFU stating you must use this, you have to have one. So
Right. Okay. Okay. What about you, Ron? Anything different from Rebecca's insight into 2025? Like, what are you excited about? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I'm looking at, they're starting to redo the ST90 right now,
oh
which
yes.
is quality management.
Okay.
And what was a little magazine before, I expect to be as big as the ST79. And I think that will get more nurses involved, get the C-suite involved, because too many times the C-suite doesn't know what the heck's going on.
Hmm.
They
That's
don't,
true.
because nobody tells them.
Yep.
I was blessed to be able to be part of the meeting with the doctors and the nurses and infection control, because I was part of infection control, which is what sterile processing is, correct?
Right.
So, and I got to sit in those meetings at the time, but after a while that went away. When I started multitasking, as hospitals have us do, because I had the OR and sterile processing and PACU and GI lab and la 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 la. You know, I had
Everything.
yes, my head exploded, Rebecca. I'm not bald yet, but it's getting close. uh, but luckily, I'm doing what I'm doing now. But I'm also looking forward to, more upgrades to some of the standards.
Mm.
All these recommendations, and you have seen this over the years, saying what's recommended now will become a standard later.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I'd love
really.
to see people get ahead of it. I love it when the people get ahead of it, and that includes borescopes, but that includes uh, magnification more than just 4-power or the 1.75 we've been working with those pullouts for decades, because that's all we had. That's not all we have anymore. There's so many more resources. I think cleaning verification is going to be a biggie, but it's not just to check your, it's to check the final process on your instrumentation, right? Is to make sure it's being done from the beginning to the end. So
Yeah.
when you receive an instrument over on the clean side, it's safe to touch with your bare hand. You shouldn't have to wear gloves in prep and pack, right?
Right.
But I think cleaning
Don't get us started on another debate
yeah,
here. I don't have
Mm.
time for that one. That is
No,
an
no,
important conversation.
that is definitely another one.
but competencies,
Yeah.
and helping people move forward with that and providing them with the education. But even as an educator, as you stated earlier, Rebecca, you can't be the one in the office. As an educator, they want to know that you can do the same job don't tell me how to do the job. Show me how to do the job.
You have to keep your skills set up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's really important for people to see you do that. If you're just sitting in the office watching videos all day and coming out and doing competencies, and they're not going to work with you. You know,
Right.
That's just the way people are. They want to see that you do what they do.
Yep.
And if you can help them do that, all the better. And explain it why we're doing it. That's the main thing. When I first started,
Right.
it was,
Why?
this is what we do.
You know,
Period.
also TIR 109, we're hoping to get out this year or 2025. So that is the technical information report on external transport of medical devices. So to supplement those that transport information that's already in ST79, there's a whole separate document we're working on getting out there. And we've worked really hard on that. And I think it'll help a lot of people supplement their transportation plan or their program at their facility. And Ron, like you said, it is very exciting to crack open ST90 again. There's a lot of people that don't realize how important having a quality program is in the continued success of your department, and then just doing the best you can. So that's really awesome that we're opening that up as well.
Yeah, that program piece, I think it is hard to overstate, even if you're just looking at the impact of leadership transitions in our departments. I've seen it time and again. I know you have too. You have a great leader, maybe charismatic, but good looking with a beard and everything. And no, just kidding. But a
Uh,
leader who leaves a department, and if there's not a program in place, like they could be like great motivators, um, quality expectations, a lot of attention to engaging that frontline staff, like you mentioned, Ron, like get folks involved to make the change. But then when that leader leaves, because there's no structure in place, there's no quality program that's driving all of this, everything just spins off the wheels. And it can take many years for that department to get reset back to a place that's actually stabilized. And it's not, to anyone's personal fault necessarily, but if you don't have a structure and a program in place, it's not repeatable. And it's very difficult for a new leader to come in and even know like what was working and why was it working, because nothing's really structured there. So I think that's really important. Like no matter, what the specific program outline is and requirements or whatever, but just having some kind of structure in place, it can be handed off to that next generation of leadership, or even to your downline leaders, to your educators, to your shift leaders, to know
mhm.
what they're supposed to be doing, and in a way that everybody's on the same page. I think, yeah, that's huge.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about workflow shifts and technology utilization. Maybe that boroscope piece is a good place to start with this. I know we keep coming back to that, but it's one of those technologies, again, that has an impact to workflow, but the technology in context is also changing too with our tracking systems, for instance, in our IFUs, our device IFUs, like you mentioned, Rebecca. So I think, Rebecca, you were the one that mentioned earlier the emphasis on documenting what we're doing. And this goes obviously into the quality management program we are just talking about. But, if we're integrating boroscope tech, it's great to be doing those inspections. It's just as important to be documenting that in a fashion that we can prove and show what's going on. How has technology been shifting? Like, what are you seeing in 2025 that will help us bring these things, the quality stuff that we're already doing, integrating it with the data capture, and then telling that story that we need to tell?
One facility that we visited recently did measure sterile processing productivity by physical touch points. So
Yeah.
instead of how many instruments you are, or how many instrument sets you are doing, or how much is sterilized per day, it's literally how many instruments has this person touched. So that's pretty amazing to me, with how the tracking systems are able to help get those numbers back up to the C-suite and show, yeah, my people are doing way more than you think they're doing. This job, even if you just have a basic instrument set, outlining those, like that standard work associated with those trays. How much time does it take to test your scissors? How much time does it take to look at it under a magnification lens? And you add it all up together. It's all about that quantitative data. But I do feel like having new technology that proves what we've been saying all along, for example, borescopes and shavers, it really helps drive home the fact that SPD it's not as simple as it used to be. There's way more steps involved than there ever used to be.
Yeah, Ron, you were in SPD before we had tracking systems.
Thanks, Hank.
Not to remind you.
Still a lot of places that don't have them, though. It's still very uncommon, and at least in my neck of the woods. But
yeah, that's that spectrum that we talked about, right? There's still departments that are kind of stuck in the 80s, got the hairdos and the music to boot. And just kidding.
You want me to put my picture with the pro or what?
Yeah. So, Ron, what are you seeing though in 2024 going into 2025? What kind of technology shifts are happening at the same time now that these new standards are rolling out? We've got new regulatory guidelines that we're having to abide by. How do you see tech integrating there?
Oh man, Getinga has what what do they call it? Their TikTok. I forget what it's called.
Oh yeah, TDoc.
TDoc.
TikTok works too, but I don't think Getinga's running that one.
But I mean, and with SPM and all these other ones that are out there, I know you are an SPM advocate when you were in sterile processing, but we've got some new technology working with borescopes. Working with borescopes has always taken a long time because we always had to go real slow and take our time and try to identify everything. And now they're coming up with an AI that it's 4 times faster than the human eye.
It's amazing.
So you can just pass it through, pass it out, and catch everything.
That's a great example.
And I know they're working with SensorTrack, SPM. I don't think Abacus is around anymore, but might be.
Yeah.
But I know they're working with a couple of companies to actually integrate that into the tracking system.
I love that.
So
glad you brought up AI, because I think this is not my interview; it's your interview. But I do think AI is going to be really like a headliner for a lot of technologies. If it's tracking systems, if it's borescopes, to your point, anything that can plug in, even. I mean, heck, it may even be integrated to some of our washers and sterilizers to kind of know what's going on and what I need to fix in the moment, as opposed to like faulting out and then stopping. Then we got to figure out what happened retroactively. Like, I think just huge potential there.
Well, even back in the old days, Hank, when I was still in the sterile processing,
when you walked uphill both ways to your SPD,
15 miles in the snow.
Steris, actually, because I got the first 7-cube washer. I was a beta site in San Antonio for the first 7-cube. And back then, they were promising to integrate the sterilizer and the computers and everything else so we could get all the data and analyze it. And it's happening. The closest I've seen so far is the Getinga version. But TDoc. I got it right. But yeah, it's happening slowly but surely. But I think the AI is going to be a big game changer. I think getting these tracking systems to do all the documentation that we've had to do for decades by hand.
Amen.
It's going to be
scanning, and I mean, I'm like, where was this? I was in sterile processing, but
well. We got about 5 minutes left here. I want to pause for our CE code and link. So real quick, I told you guys to remind me before we got done, but you didn't even have to. I reminded myself. So
I'm proud of you.
I'm on top of things here.
I know I've got it written here.
Oh, thank you. All right. So I just commented out on all the live streams real quick the link to the CE quiz. Now I'm going to tell you the CE code. So I'm not going to put the code in the comments. I'm going to say the code here. And that way you got to watch and listen to get the code. The code is Buckle Up 25. All one word. BUCKLEUP 25. Buckle Up 25 all together. If you have to use caps, it might be all caps, but just check on that. But buckle up 25 to get your 1 CE for this fantastic forward-facing conversation that we've had today. But wait, there's more. We're not quite done yet. I want to ask these guests before we leave here, your closing thoughts on 24 or 25. So, but what needs to be solved still today that's not solved? If there's innovators tuning in, like, what do you want them to be paying attention to? Or if you've got any encouragements or challenges for frontline clinicians, like what do you want them thinking about here next year? Let's start first with Ron.
Okay. First, we have to have the resources. What's the use of all the standards if we're not given the resources, right? Working together with infection control and quality management helps us get everything to the C-suite, because I'm sorry, C-suite doesn't always want to know. They don't know about sterile processing. They know nurses. They do know nurses. Okay, sometimes nurses are not the ones running the sterile processing. There's great resources out there for education right now. Steris has had their academy for years. Now Healthmark has an academy as well.
I meant to bring that up. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a brand new launch, right, Ron?
Yep. Yeah, and everything. If you get a accreditation, you get a CEU, it goes straight to HSPA, and we don't have to worry about keeping records. I mean, I used to have to copy everything and then put it in a big old folder and then send it off to ISHM or HSPA, whatever, back in the old days. And I had to do it for all my employees to help them keep up.
That's true.
But the resources, the training, and getting the C-suite involved is very important for the future. And I think we're trending that way. And like I said, getting nursing departments involved, including the OR. It has to be one big team effort if we want to keep patients safe. And sterile processing is all about patient safety, right? Send them home the better than they came in.
Amen. All right, Rebecca, what about you? I'm going to give you the last word here as we wrap. What are you excited about? What closing thoughts you want to leave with the panel today?
I'm excited, like I said earlier, just about more manufacturers starting to get more prescriptive with their IFUs. There are some super high quality IFUs out there now that I've seen. They're very detailed. They're less gray, less open for interpretation. I'm excited to see that continued improvement. I'm also really hoping that more and more IFUs specify certain pieces of equipment that are required for their inspection. I want to see more OR SPD integration as far as training goes. Like, have the OR staff in their onboarding go down to SPD for a day. Have the SPD techs go upstairs and watch cases. That should, in my opinion, I think everybody should do it like once a year or twice a year at minimum, because you need to understand how everything's used in the body to be your best tech, to be the best tech. But also, if you're wondering about a new opportunity, and you want to learn more, or if there is a job that you've always wanted that just presents itself to you, take the jump. And it may be hard to leave a facility, but at the end of the day, you can make a bigger impact if you're reaching more departments and more of an audience with your knowledge base. Challenge to learn people, like, make a list of things you want to know more about, and then in 6 months readdress. Hey, did I look up that information of what an OR educator does? Like, make a top 5 list. But also, there have got to be folks in your OR that are part of AORN or local AORN chapters or AST. So those folks can come down and help you and integrate that with each other.
And Rebecca, you did a good job too, prepping beforehand and getting your ideas out into the public space, like through podcasting, through speaking, through just content creation. So, when it came time for that job opportunity, if it's even like another facility, like doesn't have to be going over to the vendor side, but either way, the more you can put your ideas out there as someone who's passionate, who's an advocate for the industry, that's only going to help your job prospects when these big opportunities happen. So, great panel discussion, y'all. This checked all the boxes for me. I'm even more excited about 2025 than I was when we started. So mission accomplished. I want to thank you both for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Another hat.
All right. That's going to do it for this live stream. I want to thank everyone tuning in with us live. If you're watching later on demand, make sure to check the comment section for the CE link and get your code buckle up 25, all one word, buckle up, and buckle up because 2025 is going to be freaking awesome. And until we talk to you again, keep fighting dirty. See ya.
Bye.